A long-time Cleveland Catholic Church is closed tonight, but the fight to reopen its doors is still very much alive.
Regrettably, we still have some parishes that are in financial difficulty.
A handful of protesters barricaded themselves inside the church, refusing to leave until they could meet with Bishop Richard Lennon about his decision to close their parish.
We, the Diocese of Cleveland, would be closing and merging parishes in an effort to create a stronger, more vibrant presence for our church.
Today marks the final, repeated, and determined effort of Bishop Richard G. Lennon to reconfigure the Diocese of Cleveland arbitrarily based on his admittedly nebulous notion of vibrancy.
Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name.
The diocese has never known such a radical adjustment in its 162-year history.
Archdioceses and dioceses throughout our country have faced the same challenges that we faced. First, population shifts. This has resulted in approximately 2/3 of Catholics currently being served by 1/3 of our parishes. The second is financial hardship. 42% of our parishes are currently operating in the red. And finally, there are fewer priests available for ministry throughout the United States, and that is certainly true here in Cleveland.
Save our churches! Save our churches! Save our churches!
The bishop feels he can move forward with impunity. We are gathered here today to let him know that is not going to take place unwitnessed.
Many of the ones that he has closed did not meet those conditions to close. St. Emmerich is definitely one of them.
We were established in 1904 as a result of the need for the Hungarian immigrants who came at the beginning of the century. When our parents gave us the Hungarian language and prayer, they did it in Hungarian. And I still pray in Hungarian because that's what my heart is.
My name is Barbara Vamos, and I belong to St. Emmerich for 10 years.
My family came to this country in the early 50s. Ever since then, my family, the Roja family, has belonged to St. Imre Church.
We moved to the west side, and that's when we joined St. Emmerich. And that was the year 1967. It's our second home. After finishing the week, we get to meet friends and hear the Mass in Hungarian and listen to Hungarian hymns. I love that organ at St. Emmerich Church. It was a very happy situation. It was one big family. And it all seemed to be coming to an end. We all were taken by surprise. Why should we be closing? We're a very vibrant parish. The three reasons stated were lack of parishioners, lack of priests, and lack of funds. And we had all three. So we couldn't figure out why this is.
There was not a financial reason to close. If anybody still has money, it's the ethnic parishes because they value their church and they support their church.
And it was just unbelievable that they could close our church.
I felt like almost like God has left me, like God has abandoned everyone.
We have no idea what criteria he used to make decisions on who would stay open and who would stay closed.
And when they closed our beloved St. Imre, it felt like we buried our parents all over again. It was so painful. It was terrible.
We didn't know what to do. How do we respond to this? What would be the proper way to approach this?
You organize yourselves, you meet off campus so we can't throw you out, and get 2 inches away from that property line and stand your ground. And numbers count.
When the bishop drags a reconfiguration program all the way from Boston, leaving skid marks for all 650 miles.
The evidence was overwhelming who we went for.
We're going to march.
And it was the heavy majority ethnic urban parishes.
But what's intriguing about Lennon is that of the 50-some parishes that he listed for closing, 35 had strong ethnic traditions. And yet they were set up to bridge the gap between Catholic teaching, Catholic culture, and what came from the home country.
Coming over from Hungary, they were a people, though, who had already experienced great pain in their lives. And then to come and have a bishop look them in the face and say, "You're gone. This is over for you." Their heart was ripped out. Hallelujah. They thought the one place they could feel safe was the Catholic Church. And here in Cleveland, with this bishop, that wasn't the case.
As our bishop, you have a duty to be fair and just to all members of your flock. But by unilaterally closing 30 ethnic parishes, you have exhibited a palpable insensitivity to and disdain for the culture, customs, and contributions of our many ethnic brothers and sisters. Bishop, we challenge you to apologize.
Apologize! If in Boston we had had the kind of energy and focus that you guys have, we would have been miles ahead. But we're the poor schmucks that were kind of the guinea pigs, and we had to improvise.
One of the energizing forces that happened in 2002 was when the whole clergy sex abuse scandal broke in Boston and then spread like wildfire across the United States.
When the Globe was reporting this story, the church refused to speak to the paper's reporters.
Catholics who had the luxury of being passive suddenly realized we can't be passive anymore.
And after a couple of years of denying that there were any improprieties, it was all a media fabrication, then Archbishop O'Malley announced the largest settlement that had ever been seen, $85 million to settle over 500 cases.
It is not a coincidence that the great majority of the parish closings in the United States began at about the same time as the revelation of the clergy scandal.
And if you talk to the people in the pews, they draw a direct line between that scandal and the church closings.
About 2 years later, we in Boston experienced the first tidal wave of massive parish closings.
What the Archdiocese will say is, no, that's not true.
Not every Catholic believes that, and certainly the financial health of the Catholic Church has been a factor in the decision to close parishes. Obviously, a significant factor is that the Church cannot afford to maintain all the buildings that it have.
The output of money for the civil court cases, it's a lot of money. It's leaving the coffers of the diocese. How do you then replenish that, especially when you're cash poor and property rich?
What the Church would say, it is not every parish on its own. Catholicism is a community, and a responsibility for the Archdiocese is to try and maintain institutions that serve everyone, arguably even with a preference for the poor.
I saw an archdiocese that had some real serious budget problems, along with a shortage of priests who were aging out. Mass attendance was down, especially in the wake of the scandal, so collections were down, and it was sort of a perfect storm, the archdiocese would say, of, we've got to do something here, folks.
The process was started by Bishop Lennon. He became the kind of top aide to Cardinal O'Malley, and he was put in charge of assessing how many parishes the Archdiocese could support, choosing which ones to close, and leading that process of closing them. He rubbed a lot of people the wrong way.
Bishop Lennon pioneered this process in Boston.
He then moved from Boston to Cleveland, where the same kinds of patterns repeated themselves, and he again angered a lot of people with the way he handled parish closings.
For many Catholics, it has been one of the worst experiences in their lives.
St. Francis Cabrini Church was built in 1960, built in Situate, Massachusetts.
And we have the highest percentage of Roman Catholics in America in this town. We had 3,000 registered parishioners. We had 6 figures in the bank.
This was a very viable parish.
And the proof that it is a vibrant parish is that we've maintained a 24/7 vigil for over 11 years.
John and Mary Ellen Rogers have been really the heart and soul of this incredible journey.
I think we are the longest lasting vigil, probably in the history of the Roman Catholic Church. So this place is absolutely guarded 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
I've been sitting in vigil here for the complete 11 years. Oh, this parish is everything to me. This is my family. This is half my life is spent in church. And this is the bedroom I normally sleep in. I'll be sleeping here tonight. I'm willing to vigil until they haul me out of here in handcuffs, or they haul me out feet first in a box.
And we sometimes wonder, is the value of the property more valuable to the Archdiocese of Boston than the 3,000 registered parishioners at St. Francis Cabrini?
And to the Archdiocese of Boston to come in and basically try to steal it from us, as I said, to replenish the coffers depleted by sexual abuse. You don't get to hurt children and then steal my church to pay for the crimes of your past. You just don't get to do that. Not here, not ever. And that basically drives us.
A lot of the people, the faithful, believe their churches were targeted because they need the money. Now the Archdiocese will say no. The two are completely separate from each other.
During our meetings with Cardinal Sean O'Malley, we presented solutions. We've said, sell off 25 acres. Let us just keep the church. We never get answers back. It falls on deaf ears, silence.
This cardinal who has showed a degree of flexibility for 3 other groups that were in precisely the same situation has denied them what he gave 3 others. Now, is it the 30 acres of land half a kilometer from the Atlantic? Or is it the sin of pride? Or is it stubbornness?
Pretty much cookie-cutter appeals, but all 6 churches in Boston lost. Why?
And it's a no-brainer that St. Francis was unfortunately chosen, because what they're trying to do is they're trying to replenish their coffers. They were not only paying the survivors who were entitled, but they are also paying for PR people to tell us that it wasn't that important or it didn't happen. They were paying for lawyers to say the parents were negligent in letting their children be with these priests.
These were Catholics who were brought up to pay, pray, and obey. What motivated them? Why would they take such steps against, not against, but sort of against their own church? They had a powerful weapon, and that was faith.
This is what you'll be saying on the all-night thing, okay?
Why do it? It's an assignment. It's right versus wrong. It's good versus evil. It's as simple as you want to make it. And that's why we stood up. And that's why I would ask all the people through all the other churches to stand up. Otherwise, we become hourly renters in our own spiritual homes. Or in the worst case, you become trespassers like us.
What we're doing now is taking care of the property as the owner with all of the responsibilities, with people who have no right to be in the property in there.
Basically, every piece of property in the Archdiocese of Boston, unless it's covered by a trust, is owned and controlled under civil law by the Archbishop of Boston.
They've been closed 11 years, and they're still doing this. And so you can only imagine what they were like when they had a community, a parish of like 3,000 members.
I have a feeling this isn't ending, it's just starting.
It's just starting. If we are forced from our spiritual home, we will stay together as a Catholic faith community.
These are the kinds of Catholics that the Archdiocese wants. And I think the Archdiocese would agree with that.
You know, if I knew then what I know now, would we have done this? Yeah, I think so.
To all the St. Francis Vigilists, church members, your examples of unwavering courage.
I wouldn't have traded this experience for the world. I would hope that everybody gets an opportunity to experience this, and by doing so, I think they'll become a much stronger community, a much more faithful community, and quite frankly, a much more caring community.
And this is a new day, not a death. This is a birth of a new church, and a new way of thinking, and a new life. Be proud of it, because I know I'm proud of all of you. Thank you.
We witnessed the closing of St. Wendellin's this past weekend, and they had $1 million in the bank.
1.7.
Excuse me, 1.7. We're talking about churches that are self-sustaining, so churches that are drawing crowds, churches that are now chained shut.
We're like David fighting Goliath.
What made me stand up, it was unjust. When men take over the role of God, that's when something's wrong. And it's our duty as a Catholic to stand up and tell them they're wrong, no matter what it is.
I stand here in solidarity with you today to say, Bishop Lennon, please do not take away our community.
Thank you.
The fact is, to be honest, the church is changing. So at the same time, this really is the occasion for joy, because it, God willing, allow us to build a stronger church by making better use of our resources to achieve vibrancy for every parish throughout our diocese, all 8 counties.
Bishop Lennon did go out to try to talk to people.
I certainly understand people who are very sad and people who are very angry.
And a couple of places they got into a shouting match.
I ask you in the name of our everything holy, to stop. Please stop closing the churches before it's too late. I ask you.
It was not what you would call a peaceful process at all. It was extraordinarily painful. And some of those Catholics have left and never come back.
Do you really believe that I like doing this?
Yes.
What joy does it bring me?
It's money.
We have 10 days to respond to this. What do we do? How do we respond to this?
St. Emmerich's rallied very quickly to oppose the bishop's plan.
The St. Joseph Foundation mentioned that we have less than 1% chance of winning this thing because this has never happened before.
They took the advice that was given to them, they followed it, but they put their heart into it because this was their home. And I think that that really made a difference.
And eventually this might reach the Vatican, and the Vatican is circling the wagons around the bishops, And the Vatican is not really going to do anything about it, so we have less than 1% chance.
Every wheel has its hub, and he was it, you know.
I started to study canon law. I started to write the second appeal to the Vatican.
Mr. Pallermick, really, he was the center of the action, and he was focused and wise and strategic.
This was our final chance. This box contains all the originals of my appeal.
He was so passionate about saving his parish. He was an inspiration.
These are all the originals.
When a church is suppressed, the people, according to the teaching in the gospel, must first go to their own bishop and ask him to revise the decree and not suppress the parish or not close the parish. If that isn't successful and they believe that the decision is in violation of the law, then they appeal to the Congregation for the Clergy. The decisions will only be successful if the parties can demonstrate that the law was violated.
No one ever wins these appeals, you know? And so a lot of people were saying, no, I'm not even going to bother because nobody ever wins. Why would I put my energy into that?
The church has always been the center of the Hungarian culture. I'm Michelle LaFlame, and I am the president of the parish council here at St. Stephen's Church. There's not enough money and enough parishioners here to sustain the finances. If it closes, I could go and be Catholic anywhere, but I cannot be Hungarian Catholic, only here. I'm hoping that the Archdiocese will sell it so that we could have a Hungarian museum here. To be read at the last Mass. Some of my final words are, closing the church, such a brave thing to do.
The faith that builds this parish is not going away. It is being transplanted.
Don't lose your faith in God. As always, when the door closes, a window opens. So don't lose hope.
When I heard from my Hungarian American friends about the problems of St. Emmerich, of course I offered to use the connections my family has in the Vatican. Having a church in a place like Cleveland, which was so important for the Hungarian community, which was a weekly meeting point to come together and to preserve your culture, language and traditions, this is one of the most important places you can keep. The church closed, and after that there was a group that formed, and every Sunday these people gathered there in winter weather, in summer heat.
Rain, snow, we used to have blizzards. We had to shovel, but we would pray and sing. But every single Sunday, at least 12 to 13 people showed up, and it never stopped.
And this happened every Sunday for 2.5 years.
It says in canon law that the pastor must defend his people, and I have to defend them against the bishop.
It's so refreshing to run into priests that aren't afraid to stand up for what's right. And that's Bob to a T.
When the people of St. Emmerich's were suffering, the people of St. Coleman's gladly welcomed them. And I learned enough to say, Ozotya aftiyu esasentli lek neveben, a little bit of Hungarian, so that we could celebrate the Mass in Hungarian. And for 2 years, we were celebrating together.
The support they gave these people. I mean, you want a miracle? The kindness, the love, the support. That parish, St. Coleman and Father Bob, gave to the people of St. Emmerich was amazing.
I asked him, why are you doing this to us? He says, well, because I know you're hurt, and I'd like to cure that. He went out of his way to really take away our hurt.
Looking at the experience of Boston and Cleveland, New York, very consciously tried to learn from what went wrong in other places.
In an effort to cut costs, the New York Archdiocese expects to shut down or consolidate 14% of its parishes.
More than 100 parishes will be merged into just 55, and some closed outright.
New York, of course, is an enormous diocese. There was a lot of effort to be consultative. It was still wound up painful. There are still people who are furious, who feel like their parishes were targeted unfairly for the wrong reasons.
I believe the real reasons for closure is money. This is a very affluent area. The property here is probably worth $40 to $50 million. 8 of the 11 churches that closed in Manhattan were all churches that are soon going to be right next to the new 2nd Avenue subway. The values, for example, on this block, they've gone up in the past year 30%.
So what's happening here in finance terms, and this is a lesson for the future, is that you're selling permanent assets, the spiritual infrastructure of the church, the parishes. You're selling them off to meet current operational costs. That's not sustainable.
Cardinal Dolan said that the restructuring is not the result of a shortage of priests, but from a shortage of the faithful.
Sweet Mother Mary, I offer thee this spiritual communion to bind my bouquets in a wreath. We decided that anybody can get angry. That's not what this parish was about. The day after the church closed is when we started doing the rosary. And there has been someone at the steps doing the rosary every night since. Ave, Ave, Ave Maria. I'm the 3rd generation. My nephews and their children are the 4th and 5th generation of people in this parish. So from our perspective, if you were to take every photograph album you had in your house and lost it in a fire, it's as if you've taken and negated the history of my entire family. This is their wedding picture formally from Our Lady of Peace.
What makes this a wonderful parish, all the activities we had going on here, collecting food for the poor, for City Harvest. In fact, the Archdiocese even said our rite of Christian initiation program was the best of any parishes in the whole Archdiocese of New York. And if this is what the mission of the church is about, why would you close a church that is bringing new Catholics in?
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners.
It didn't make any sense. The reasons they were giving for closing churches didn't apply to Our Lady of Peace. Our attendance was growing. There are no liabilities. There's no debt on this church. There's no shortage of priests. And it's a vibrant community of faith. So why would it be closed?
Well, we still have appeals in, but they're new appeals. We've got another petition we're going to sign.
We're trying to raise $500,000 to improve our chances of winning an appeal. And what that $500,000 would do is, for the next 10 years, allow us to maintain the church.
It was supposedly not about money. Now they're in negotiations, and it's a negotiation to sell. If you didn't speak to us for more than 300 days, for the first conversation to be had directly with parishioners of Our Lady of Peace, that was inappropriate, unchristian, and uncalled for. And there's a reason why they just don't want Our Lady of Peace open. They're cashing in on any of these properties, as quickly and as quietly as they can.
And if they are having financial problems, I wouldn't be surprised if something like that happened.
Mother of her love, protect our families.
We've got until February to continue submitting new information to the Congregation for the Clergy, and we're hopeful we'll hit our 500,000 target by then.
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. I think that if I look at it from me personally, I pray more now than I ever did before. I am more in tune to the world and how my faith interacts with that world, and I care more about my community than I did before. So from that standpoint, I actually do believe this is the church. Okay, so let's begin as we do every night. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, amen.
The significant thing about this decree is that the Congregation for the Clergy issues an order to Cardinal Dolan setting out very clearly that he must maintain the church as a church for both public and private worship.
Now, what could be a greater public worship than the Holy Mass? So that would mean that it should have a Mass at least every Sunday. This is the one and only Hungarian church. It's a real scandal, I'm sorry to say that they closed the one and only.
St. Stephen of Hungary has a very vibrant Hungarian community. They come from the tri-state area to that church to have a Mass celebrated in Hungarian.
My hopes that the Vatican is listening our cry.
The communists take away our life in Hungary, and then we felt good in here. We felt that, as I say, it's a little part of the Hungary, and now they took it away.
I used to walk all this from the avenue to come to church here 20 years ago.
My husband and I are ministers of the Eucharist.
We're going to Miss Jacob's home. She was a parishioner for many years, so we're going to bring her communion.
And like her, there's a lot of other people around that I don't know about that need the church, that need the communion. For me, it's my family. If one is sick, we're there.
Hello. How are you?
Okay. I'm glad to see you. Right now, our only mission is bringing communion and visiting the sick.
The body of Christ.
Amen.
Well, first, I couldn't believe it. I cried a lot.
When we did get the initial news, it was shock. There was no real reason given to any of the parishes from what I saw. It was very formulaic, so everyone just got the same form decree.
I told everyone I will never leave the building. I said I'll be here until God tells me to leave.
Whoever made the decision, they didn't come down to see the distance where we are located. This is the only Catholic church all around.
Where are people supposed to go? You want them, the diocese says we want people to go to church. Where?
Whoever made the decision was not thinking about the older generation. And they need to be fed. They need to be nourished. Are we worthless? I'm an emotional person, so I get emotional when I look around and I see this beautiful church and all the things that we have lived through here.
So I've been at this parish since 1988, when I was 5 years old in kindergarten.
Her name is Edna Augusta. She is the pillar of this church. She is the strength of it.
As soon as we got the news, we tried everything. We wrote letters to the Vatican. We looked up Sister Kate. We found her. We did the appeal.
But I still hope that a miracle will happen and that we will reopen next year.
You cannot close God in a building. The church is never closed. Never. Because the church is within you.
I was very happy, I was elated.
The first good news was from the Vatican. And then when we got the other good news about being opened as a worship site, that was amazing. One thing that's wonderful about this parish is we always come together to support one another. Worship site means that we are opened, as you can see, for Sunday masses, for regular masses, but we are not an individual parish.
We can't give up because I have said if I throw the towel, that'll be the end of it. So it's a miracle, really. I think it's a miracle.
We praise you and with joy we acclaim.
We have to go out there and let people know that we are open, that we are here. We are here to stay.
The Cardinal wants a vibrant parish. I think we have a vibrant parish, but we don't have the numbers.
The church, that church in front there, in 2 years' time, is supposed to be full. And it will be full. By the grace of God, we're going to fill it.
And it's been a long, difficult journey for the church to acknowledge that, well, maybe we're the experts on theology, but there are other experts on financial management, on human resources, on building preservation.
In terms of things going smoothly, that's what the Archdiocese and the Reed Group would like people to believe.
As Reed Group consultants, our role is to facilitate the process, to help people be heard, to mediate disputes as they come up.
It really didn't go all that smoothly. People are very upset.
And some of the information at the very onset of our meetings, we just did not understand.
The Reed Group was pretty much here to serve as a buffer between ourselves and the Cardinal.
These are the planning and implementation guides for all the dioceses we've worked in. And our commitment as Catholics is to help the church grow. We really don't bring an agenda of our own.
I was talking with the Reed Group a lot, with their representatives, who guided us, enough in the process.
Well, it wasn't so much pastoral planning so much as it was consolidation. And that was pretty much the message we got from them from the get-go.
We're often criticized for forcing mergers on dioceses or being merger-driven, and we're not. We want whatever they think is best. This is not about moving widgets around a board. It's really saying, how can this church be as strong as possible?
It's unfortunate that anyone has to do that kind of work in the way they do it, so systematically. It's as though we're dealing with corporations and not churches.
This church has had a 2,000-year history and policy of universality. Now it is in retreat and corporate downsizing.
What the bishops fail to understand is people are not corporations.
Running a parish or running a diocese is seen more on a business level than on a spiritual and pastoral model.
So it's a very serious thing to treat this living, dynamic manifestation of the Spirit of God as if it's some Starbucks franchise that you can just get rid of because, oh no, we already have a store that's, only 3 miles away. Well, that's not how the Spirit works.
Then on March 1st, the news broke.
We start with breaking news update in an unprecedented move. The Vatican has reportedly overruled the Cleveland Catholic Diocese decision to close 13 area parishes.
And I was just getting off the plane in Toronto, then my cell phone rang. 11 churches will be reopened, and we're one of them.
Today, many parishioners I spoke to say their prayers have been answered, and now they're anxious for what's next.
Whoa, I said, wow, great! And people were looking at me, why am I yelling and getting off the plane like that?
It's time for peace and unity in the Diocese of Cleveland. I will not appeal the decrees.
All praise to the Father from whom all things come.
First of all, there was just shock. And not just shock on the part of the people, but also me. I had never seen this before. I knew something very special had happened. It was a lifting of the spirits. It was like, well, somebody has heard us. Someone has believed our story.
It's like a new life for all of us. We who prayed, come rain or shine or blizzard, we prayed for 2 years almost, and thank God the Lord heard us.
I'm still astonished. Our parish finally reopened. Who would ever thought that the most impossible of the impossible took place?
I don't think you can point, certainly I'm sure in Catholic America, to an instance where 11 parish suppression decrees were reversed in one effing day. So we have Lennon to thank for that.
Then that went into the next phase of anxiety. How soon can we get back in? Who are our pastor going to be?
Again, the demoralizing of the people through that. They slowly went into another depression. And in a way, it was almost worse than the first.
I turned to a canon lawyer who happened to be a religious sister.
The bishop was treating them like a territorial parish without making them a territorial parish. And that was how I developed the argument. This is a personal parish, and everything the bishop is doing is invalid and unlawful.
The difference between territorial and personal parishes: a personal parish is for a specific reason, such as Hungarian language mass. A territorial is a certain territory of the diocese is assigned to one church.
We sent this document in. It was a very short document. Within weeks, we got the response. All of a sudden, the pastor was reinstated, the building was going to be reopened, and it was just like day and night.
By the end of September, Bishop Lennon agreed to bring Father Sándor back. My final letter went out to the Vatican, thanking them for their effort.
When I got the phone call from Mick that everything was going to happen, I mean, I think he and I both did the happy dance. The day of the opening Mass, to see this church so packed.
The church was packed, wall to wall, standing room only.
Your community has stayed together.
The Hungarian church is more than just a place of worship. The church is supposed to be a second home.
The energy of being together as a community was the most astounding feeling.
When the church reopened, there were people to fill the pews because they had stuck together for those 2 or 3 years.
It was the most mind-opening thing, I think, when you put prayer and good works into action, that everything comes alive.
I mean, people had their place back, their spiritual home.
We would like to say thank you to Mr. and Mrs. Peller. Without them, this church would have not opened up.
And then their pastor died. So they got their pastor back. That was a big fight. And he died suddenly.
Again, we were faced with a dilemma as to what's going to happen to us.
We are in desperate need of a priest who is youthful and whom young people will flock to.
We know that Hungarian-speaking priests are not readily available, so we have to do something about it.
How do you bring back the religion to people? How do you bring them back to the church again when you close the churches?
A study from the Council of Pastoral Planning and Council Development that showed that parishes that are closed outright lose some 40% of parishioners.
Without a doubt, the loss of the faithful is the biggest damage done.
To see a group of people who have a 2,000-year history of religion become so demoralized in such a very short time should bring everyone to question what is the value of that.
But you know, they're tenacious, so they went to Hungary. They talked to the bishop and said, we need a Hungarian-speaking priest.
And Father arrived in late June.
I realized it's very necessary to be here.
És akkor nem tudunk közelebb kerülni az Istenhez.
It is wonderful. It's like a new life for all of us.
He has a magnetism that draws the youth.
He's a young priest with new ideas, and he's doing an incredible job.
A community without Hungarian priest, it's very bad thing. The most important for Hungarians in Cleveland to be a spiritual home.
Catholicism is the largest single faith group in the United States. So what happens in the Catholic Church is very important. Catholic churches have been significant forces in the neighborhoods in which they are located. They often run schools, hospitals. So the health of the church often make a difference to a lot of people whether or not they are Catholic because they are a significant presence.
And after the reopened church, our community, St. Mary community, became more stronger.
He's bringing all the young people back to the church, which is, I believe, it is a miracle.
He loves to engage with the Scouts when they're here.
The Boy Scouts have been at this church since the 1960s. We are really the only Hungarian youth organization that is helping to preserve the language and the customs, history, traditions of Hungary.
Without Hungarian school, without Hungarian heritage, we'll be die short time.
The population is aging and there hardly is much of a replacement. This is why Hungarian churches are slowly dying out, and we're not fighting it because it's inevitable. But we like to maintain it as much as possible.
If it's going to die out, it should die out naturally. It should certainly not be forced out.
If the love of the heritage, the scouting, the culture, the history is well received, it will be passed on.
St. Emmerich has helped maintain this spiritual and cultural centrum for the Cleveland Hungarians.
It's not the church that's important for that, it's this church and this church community and this church that understands who I am as a Hungarian person. So that's something we have a right to.
This is a revolution. It's a revolution of faith. Unless they stand up to it, that this is going to continue until the last priest shuts off the last light of the last church, and then it's over.
That runs so counter to the mission of the church. If we're about saving souls, then why are we closing churches?
That you can sense the love and how hard he's actually trying to bring the life back to this church.
He just brings the best vision for a future here.
I cannot live without hope, so I think we have some hope to keep, to save our Hungarian heritage, our Hungarian church. I hope so.